San Bernardino County can't seem to escape the corruption headlines. The latest? On May 10th, prosecutors announced a 29-count indictment against a Rancho Cucamonga developer and 3 former and current county officials. The bribery and corruption charges stem from the county's $102 million settlement with Colony's partners in November 2006. The deal, approved on a narrow 3-2 vote, ended a lengthy legal battle over who should pay for flood control improvements on Colony's upland development. But now, prosecutors say that settlement was reached through bribery in what District Attorney Mike Ramos has called the biggest corruption case in county history. Charged in the latest indictment are Jeff Burham, co-managing member of Colony's partners, former San Bernardino County Supervisor Paul Bian, one of the 3 who voted for the settlement, Mark Kirk, former Chief of Staff to Supervisor Gary Ovitt and current Director of Government Relations, and Jim Irwin, a former Assistant Assessor and former Chief of Staff to Supervisor Neil Derry. At the time of the settlement, Irwin acted as a mediator and consultant to Colony's partners. All have denied wrongdoing through their attorneys. Former Supervisor Bill Postmus faced similar charges last year and recently pleaded guilty to accepting a bribe for his vote to approve the settlement. Before the latest indictment, in late April, the State Attorney General's office charged Supervisor Neil Derry with laundering a $5,000 campaign donation through a political action committee with ties to Postmus. Prosecutors say Derry attempted to hide the true source of the donation. He's denied wrongdoing. Meanwhile, in a separate corruption case out of the county assessor's office, a jury last October convicted former Rancho Cucamonga councilman Rex Gutierrez of 2 counts of grand theft, 1 count of conspiracy, and 1 count of filing a false claim. The charges stem from his role as an intergovernmental affairs officer in the assessor's office. Gutierrez is now serving a 2-year, 8-month sentence set at Tehachapi State Prison. That's all against a backdrop of a history of political corruption in the county. In the 1990s, the county went through a series of corruption scandals involving bribery among top county executives. One former official was sentenced to 2 years in prison. So what's next for San Bernardino County? Joining me now to discuss the ongoing corruption case is Press Enterprise columnist Cassie McDuff. Cassie, thanks for joining us. You know, when the prosecutors announced that May 10th indictment, what was your first reaction to these charges?
Well, first of all, it wasn't entirely unexpected because in the previous indictments of Bill Postmus, the former assessor, and Jim Irwin, his former assistant assessor, there were 5 unnamed, unindicted co-conspirators, and it was pretty clear from the allegations who those people were. 3 of them now were indicted in this current indictment, and 2 of them were not. And Irwin's case was folded into this new indictment. His earlier case was dismissed. So it didn't come as entirely a surprise. But walking into that press conference, I think the big surprise for everyone was to see on the wall a big fugitive wanted poster for Paul Bian, the former county supervisor.
Yeah, this seems to have played out in a very public way in many respects. You walked in, you saw that poster, fugitive arrest warrant for Paul Bian. He was later arrested just after he arrived on a flight at Ontario International Airport. Bail was set between $2 million and $10 million for these 4 individuals. They all spent 2 nights in jail. Once bail was reduced, they had to wear ankle bracelets with electronic monitoring. The judge asked to have them come into court and prove it. They all came in, raised up their pant legs to show that they had these ankle bracelets on. That's very public. Is this unusual?
Absolutely. What's most common is for the attorneys, for people who know they're under investigation, retain attorneys right up front. The attorneys are in touch with the prosecutors and they're given a heads up, and the people who are allowed to come in and surrender themselves voluntarily and be booked very quietly and then released on their own recognizance quite often. In this case, bail was set very high, and it's hard for even people as wealthy as Burham, this developer, to get that kind of liquid assets immediately to be able to be released.
You know, Jim Irwin's case is an example. He was charged previously with very similar charges. Those were dismissed because the indictment now superseded those other charges. And he's made every single one of his court appearances. He's been arrested a couple times and previously booked into the county jail system. But this time, he faced a really high bail, $2 million. Are you hearing from people that say maybe these were a little too high and excessive, these bail amounts?
Well, the bail amounts were unusually high. People say even homicide can have a $1 million bail. However, I think the purpose of bail in this case is to make sure that the defendants don't leave the area and that they're available for when the case goes to court. Bian had been told not to leave the area, and he was arrested, as you say, flying back from Las Vegas. The other three did turn themselves in and were quietly booked as kind of more par for the course.
And of course, the judge in the case has restricted them to Southern California only and made it very clear to them if they violate those terms, their bail is going to immediately go back up to those higher amounts. Central to this case are the bribery allegations and a total of about $400,000 in political donations from Colony's partners to a series of political action committees. Those were made beginning in early 2007, just a few months after the settlement in November 2006. On the surface, they appeared legal. They were properly reported. You know, I first wrote about them in 2008. We teamed up again for a more detailed look a year later. But now prosecutors saying those are indeed bribes. How is this going to be a tough road ahead for the district attorney to prove what are normally legal contributions in a county with no limits are in fact bribes?
Well, I think the defense attorneys are probably going to attack that, first of all, saying these were all declared properly. These donations were made to political action committees that were registered with the Secretary of State, and everything was done publicly. So if it was graft, it was, if you will, the money was hidden in plain sight. So that's probably the first hurdle that the prosecutors will have to get over.
Right. Yeah, I've talked to a couple of experts that said one of the things they'll have to do is prove that there was an intent or prove that there was actual evidence to suggest or to show that an agreement was made to use these contributions as a bribe. Do you see it that way as well?
Well, yes, but I think the prosecutors now have a couple of really strong witnesses on their side to back up if there was a conspiracy, how that conspiracy played out. And of course, primary among those is Bill Postmus, the former assessor, who had pled guilty just, I think, a month before these charges came down. A new grand jury was convened soon after he pled guilty to all of the charges against him, took evidence from 50-some witnesses, and very quickly these indictments came down. So obviously having a witness who was at the heart of what was going on in those days is crucial to the case.
Of course, defense attorneys are probably going to attack, and already have started to attack Postmus's credibility, because he has acknowledged a battle with substance abuse and drugs. He had faced charges on drug charges. Campaign finance seems to be at the center of a lot of recent political corruption cases, not only in San Bernardino County, but in Riverside County as well. Supervisor Neil Derry was just a few days before the latest indictment was charged by the State Attorney General's office and accused of laundering a $5,000 campaign donation through a political action committee with ties to Postmus. He's accused of kind of orchestrating a way to hide a developer's involvement in his campaign for supervisor. He's up for re-election next year. Facing these charges, is this going to be a tough road ahead for him on re-election? Is this going to be a backdrop in that campaign, do you think?
Well, already a candidate has come forward and declared, and this is unusually early for someone to come forward. James Ramos is a chairman of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians based in San Bernardino. He's already in elected office. He has a great deal of financial wherewithal to mount a campaign. So I think this could be a very tough one for Derry, just as it was for Bian when he was under suspicion, although not under indictment. Janice Rutherford, who ultimately prevailed, not by a very wide margin, but reform and ethics were a centerpiece of her campaign.
Is county corruption, the county's history of corruption, going to be kind of an overarching theme in future elections for the Board of Supervisors? It seems like it's this albatross that's always out there in county government and county politics. Well,
certainly it can be. It's a weapon that any challenger could bring up. In fact, it was even brought up by Derry against the man that he challenged, Dennis Hansberger, who had voted against that $102 million settlement. So it's something that can be raised. Any new candidate coming in can say the county needs reform. Whether the voters buy that, whether any real change from this kind of old boy network of corruption takes place, again, remains to be seen.
Right. So where does the county go from here? They've made a number of proposals and made a number of changes that have boosted transparency. They were one of the first counties to put campaign finance data up online for everyone to see. They're still one of the few counties to put what are called Form 700s up online. These are those statements of economic interest that detail sources of income and gifts and help people determine whether or not an elected official and top staff members have conflicts of interest. But other things haven't really gone anywhere. Supervisor Neil Derry proposed an ethics commission during his campaign. That hasn't gotten off the ground. He did propose a sunshine ordinance, but some say it lacks teeth. Now, Supervisor Josie Gonzalez, the current chair of the Board of Supervisors, has her own reform proposal. What are the details of that, and is it going to work?
Well, I think it addresses one small part of the problem. Her proposal would ban supervisors' use of discretionary funds. Each supervisor gets about $500,000 to use in their district or to use as they see fit. Ordinarily, that money is used for special projects in the district, like a road that needs paving or curbs and sidewalks that on the way to a school, or for community groups that are doing service in the communities. But supervisors lately have been using that money to add to their own personal district staffs, and this would prohibit that.
Do you think that's a way to kind of prevent supervisors from building like a political machine in their Board of Supervisor offices?
Well, absolutely, because that was at the heart of what the grand jury found fault with in Bill Postmus, the former supervisor. When he became assessor, he built what later was characterized as a political machine with 10 top executive positions.
Right. What are some of the other details in her proposal?
Well, it would ban supervisor staff from serving as paid consultants to their election campaigns. It would ban the use of discretionary funds for self-promotion, like establishing a scholarship in their names to get their names out there, that kind of thing. And it would also create a standardized contract for board staff and require them to have regular performance evaluations, just like every other county employee.
But some say, ultimately, if there's a will, there's a way to get around some of these rules. Do the voters have to have a say in this? Maybe by electing different people who, because it seems like people will run on a reform proposal and then a few years later they themselves get in trouble.
Well, Derry is a good example of that. And in fact, it was surprising to me that Janice Rutherford only beat Paul Bien by so few votes, only about 3 percentage points. So I think an engaged electorate is really important to the process. I think it's important for people to express what reforms they believe are needed, to attend Board of Supervisors meetings, to kind of petition their elected representatives to make some real substantive changes.
Right. Well, it will be interesting to see how all this unfolds. You can read Cassie's columns and stay up to date on the latest corruption cases in San Bernardino County in the Press Enterprise and PE.com. I'm Dwayne Gang. Thanks for watching.